Now we're going to look at the first of the methods for expanding double brackets that we showed in part 4. Just a reminder, there are 3 of these. There's the inspection method, I'll call it. There's long multiplication in the column method. And then there's grid multiplication. Feel free to watch 1, 2 or all 3 depending on how you feel the topic should be tackled. So let's begin with the following example. A reminder first of what we did previously. If I had 3 lots of x plus 5, I would take what was here and multiply the whole bracket by it. I would do this times this, and then I would do this times this. I would take what was outside and I would multiply each term in the bracket by that. So let's do that. I'm going to take what's outside the second bracket and multiply each term in the bracket by it. So that's this times x. And it's this times 5. The reason I write the x at the beginning is it just looks neater. So it was the thing outside times the first one, the thing outside times the second one. So it's the thing outside times the first one, the thing outside times the second one. Now I expand these single brackets. Then I look for simplifying, and I find that these middle 2 can be simplified together, and I get 8x. So, I've got a method here. We'll do one more like this, and then we'll look at introducing some negatives and some other bits. So I take what's outside and multiply it by the first term, and then what's outside and multiply it by the second term. Then I just expand the brackets like so, like so, like so, and like that, simplifying the 2 that I can. Now, the real skill we're trying to work on here is this first line. And as you'll find in maths, particularly in algebra, it's that first step that's the new bit, and then everything else is practicing old skills. So if you practice a skill until you're really confident, you will be fine on the new skill. So let's introduce a negative now. Then we'll tackle what happens when we have a pair of negatives. So I take what's outside and times it by the first. Then I take what's outside and times it by the latter. Then I expand the single brackets. Then I simplify where I can. So the fact there was a negative meant this. There is minus 2. Remember that the minus sign is attached to the 2. So the minus has to come into play here. This term matches exactly here. So let's do the same here. The the whole first term gets multiplied by x, and the whole first term gets multiplied by minus 3. Expand my first bracket. Expand my second bracket. Why have I paused here? Think back to the expanding and simplifying video. Let me help. Often people forget this minus. Minus 3 times minus 9 is plus 27. Just made an error there. So it's minus 3 and minus 9. Now, those are the basics of expanding a bracket. We're going to look at some more slightly altered situations now, but the same rule applies. First off, we're going to look at a bracket squared. Then we're going to look at a bracket multiplied by 3 things. Then we're going to make the terms in our bracket different. So, there are many possible answers that people give for this when you ask them. What do you think it is? Well, here are some of the answers you see regularly. None of those 3 answers are correct. So let's slow down for a second. What does squared actually mean? Squared actually means the thing multiplied by itself. So 3 squared means 3 multiplied by 3. So this means x plus 6 multiplied by x plus 6. Now we can approach it in the same way as before. The whole of the first thing times the first term. And the whole of the first thing times the second term. Then we expand our single brackets. Then we tidy up by simplifying. In a rush, people will often forget what squared means and will put down one of these other answers. Take your time and think it through. The second one. So, if you had 3 outside of this bracket, you would multiply 3 by each term inside. That rule has been the same all the way through expanding brackets. Even here where we have a bracket outside, we're going to do a bracket times by a term, then a bracket times by a term, then a bracket times by a term. So our rule is consistent, and that's what maths is. It will follow the same strategy each time. You just have to make sure you're fully happy with what that strategy is. So the thing outside times by the first term, the thing outside times by the second term, the thing outside times by the third term, so expand the single brackets, and then look for simplifying. Now there are 3 terms with x in here. I get 5x from those and y lots of x from that one. I'm not going to put the y in with the x's. I'm going to do this. X squared plus 5x plus yx plus 3y plus 6. There is a way of simplifying these 2 terms together. There's also a way of simplifying those 2 terms together. But because all 3 don't go together, I'm going to leave it separate. So a squared meant multiply 2 of the same bracket together, and 3 things in a bracket made no difference. We followed the same process. Okay, now the things inside the bracket are getting more complicated. So it's still the same process. We just have to be more careful. The thing outside the bracket times by the first one. The thing outside the bracket times by the second one. You can see here, as we go through term by term, negatives are going to be an issue. If you ever need to, just write yourself out a little set on the side to check. So I'm going to put these in order with the highest x power first, because that's convention. So that is the inspection method covered. What you'll see in the next part is the same thing with the column method, and then the same thing with the grid method.